Hi everyone, Sarah Griffiths again, and welcome back to today's podcast. And we have another episode here on becoming the light from the shadows of abuse. And as always, I'm going to ask my guest to introduce herself. I think they know much more about themselves than I do. So today I have Diana Brandt with me. And Diana is going to tell you all about herself, but she's going to be sharing with us a story today that she says what she really wants to convey is that it's all about childhood coping and resilience.
Yeah.
So always have guests on here that share amazing insights and just inspire and encourage so much. So Diana, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm looking forward to having this time with you.
Oh, look, I always appreciate all of my guests, the time they spend, and that they all dig so deep, and everyone is so natural and so vulnerable in this mission to share this story that whatever we've been through, we can heal. So on that note, talking about healing, without going into all the details, just give us a snapshot, a glimpse of who you are today, and then we'll have a look at who you were.
Okay. So again, my name is Diana Brandt, and I basically founded a nonprofit in 2008. It was near the end of the summer of 2008. And initially, I started it thinking it was going to be focused more with women and eco-sustainability, introducing people to different things that they could switch switch their purchases and try something new and see if it's less impactful to our environment. And then somebody from the city council joined. It was an officer who came up to me at the very end of the meeting and said, "This should not be just for women, and it's so cool. It really should be for both men and women. We should all enjoy it. It should." So I continued with that, and basically it's nonpartisan, which I think is really important. It's public educational outreach, and its mission is focused on introducing people to healthier lifestyle choices, eco-sustainable products and services that are in the marketplace. And we update each year so that it's staying current. And we have a Facebook page, and we also have a Meetup, and we have a website. So that's where we are. Yeah.
That's so wow. That's such a I don't even know what to say. That's just such a selfless thing to do. No, it's such a
Yeah.
good focus. And particularly at the moment, I think, obviously, we're recording this in the 2020 coronavirus.
Yeah.
And we've all been given time to look inwards, to look at the way that we live, and
Yes.
what are we eating, and we have more time, and to look at our choices and our impact on the environment. And I think that with the self-isolation that we're all going through and all the restrictions, I think a lot of us are discovering that we can do with a lot less.
Yes, we are. And I've heard this from other people and also family members saying, I'm discovering my creativity in the kitchen, and I'm eating better, and I'm
Right.
actually taking more time with myself. So that's really
Yeah.
good.
How wonderful. But yeah, you're obviously what you're doing with your business there, that's amazing, educating people, because so often people, they have an idea about something they want to do, like maybe they want to go vegan or something, and they don't know. They don't know about it.
We introduce people to a lot of different types of diets. We have these forums where we run them like a party, and they are physical, where we're meeting in person. And they're having the opportunity to really kick off discussions, and we follow the forms of proper etiquette with debate, which is important because a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know how to have a really good dynamic discussion without feeling some sort of defense mechanism if they think, oh, nobody's agreeing with me.
Yeah, that's true. And we could say a lot about where that comes from, our desire to be heard, our need to be right, you know.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very
So
common.
we have icebreakers, and we encourage everybody to be heard, and everybody respectfully listens,
Yeah.
and we all come at the end together. It's very nice because it feels like a room full of great friends.
Well, it sounds like a really lovely environment that you're fostering there. And obviously, at the end, what we'll do, we'll provide all your links. And I'm sure people will be very interested to go and have a look at your website and have a look at what you do, and have a look at the choices they can be making within the environment to support the environment, rather than hinder it. So that's who you
Yeah,
are now. And obviously, that's been a journey to get there. So but
yeah.
now we understand who you are and what you do now. Let's have a look. I'm just going to leave you. As always, I will just interject or ask questions where appropriate, make observations and share insights. But obviously, if you can go back. I know you have this whole journey based on discovering that you were resilient and that you had these great coping skills. So I wonder if you could just take us back, take us
I
back to
will.
where, what was happening in your life, and how you were managing and how you became the person that you are today.
I remember when my parents seemed to be very happy, and I think I was about 2 or 3 years of age. And I know that's really young, but I do have some memories of that
Hmm.
time. And looking at both of my parents and thinking that they were the most beautiful people in the world. Because I would see other children with their parents, I think, wow, my parents, they're magnificent, they're gorgeous. Of course, as a child, I don't know if I had those words, but I was thinking these things that I was so enamored of them and thought that they were perfect people. And that was how my life started, with that feeling. It was very good. And then my parents, when I was 5, they started having a lot of different kinds of yelling, screaming matches. And at some point, I think in that time in my life, I was really close to my father, and they call that the period when there's a gender switch where you start first with the mom, but then you move over to dad. And so
Right.
I'm daddy's little girl at that point. Yeah. And it was kind of a neat time because I remember him taking me on his shoulders into our back garden where he planted a lot of produce. And there were all these big caterpillars that were really big, with yellow and black and white stripes on them. And I guess they were eating some of the stuff that was there. That he basically told me, don't be afraid. And he picked one up and held it in front of me. So he encouraged me to, you know, be sensual and explore, which I think that was a really good thing that he did.
I was
But
just Funny
yeah,
enough, I was just making the observation there, and it might be wrong or it might be right, that so very early on, you have your father introducing you to the environment, and
it's
this whole thing
true.
about don't be afraid of it, just be involved, just understand it, and that's very much how it feels. So, I maybe what you do with your environment is part of your connection with your father, and the
It
way he
is.
encouraged you.
He was extremely active, and
Right.
he was the one who did introduce me to the outdoors and getting really involved. So that's very perceptive. You got that. My
Yeah. The way you were talking about it there. Sorry.
Yeah,
Carry on.
no, it's true.
Lovely.
And so my My dad, though, he was initially, I guess, in his life, he wanted to become an attorney in forensics. And he then decided he was going to go into police work, and he thought maybe the FBI. I don't know why things kept shifting. The story is that then he married, and my mother had us. I also have a brother that's 18 months younger, and that we came so quickly that he just had to get himself a good job, which the
Right.
police department was hiring. So he became a police officer. And that's really demanding. And I wasn't seeing him that much. He primarily would come in the early morning hours, like at 3 a.m. And I would typically hear him, and I would realize, well, that's where all the ice cream's going. Because he's just eating a big container of ice cream. He would polish the whole thing.
Wow, how cute. What a lovely realization,
Yeah,
at that age, what a gorgeous way to think about it, How lovely.
yes. So I had there were my parents. There's a lot about them that I love. People are complex, but there's some unfortunate things that happened as I got older. But with this particular time when I was 5, my dad, I knew him as a man that never cried.
Mhm.
And he had a voice that is a very strong baritone. I can't even really imitate how he sounds, but it's really low. And if he called me just Diana, I would immediately think, oh no, I would freeze. He didn't have to spank me or anything. It was just his voice that he would use, and it worked.
Right.
So, what I remember was one day hearing my father crying. And this was a pivotal time in my life. I made my way out of the house and saw the front of the yard, my dad sitting on his motorcycle, crying his eyes out. And it caused me to tremble. And I remember feeling like I couldn't stop crying uncontrollable. And it was uncontrollable crying from me.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
made my way down to see my mom also crying and saying, "You don't have to leave." And my dad said, "But I do." And then he called me over to him and he said, "Come here." And he gave me a hug and he said, "I just want you to know I love you, sweetie. I'm not going to be living with you anymore, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to see you anymore." And it was extremely traumatic for me, actually, because
Yeah.
I didn't really know, I didn't have a sense of time of when he would come back. And it actually was a long time before my dad did reconnect with us. I'm gonna guess that it was probably, looking back now, that it was probably maybe 4 months, 5 months later. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been very traumatic for you because obviously for you at that time, your dad was your rock.
Yeah, he was. It was rough. And then my next switch really was in elementary school. My mother, she was now basically raising my brother and I alone. And we moved into a home that initially it was my grandmother's home, but she had renters in it. So my grandmother had these renters move out so that my mom could move in and take care of us.
Mhm.
And the first few years of elementary school, even though I was a very independent kid, I was having trouble with staying focused. So I know now, I think it was because I still hadn't gotten over the fact that my parents had split. It was the time of it. It emotionally just threw me off. Even
Yeah.
though I'd gone to preschool and I had done really well in preschool, I just couldn't stay focused. in kindergarten, and I know there's not a whole lot that goes on in kindergarten, but
And let's just touch on that, because
yeah.
that is so important, because so many people who go through trauma, they then blame themselves for not being able to focus and for not being as academic as they were. This comes up so much with children who are abused. Now, I know at this point you weren't being, but
No.
you had suffered a trauma. And obviously and I'm going to say this so that people understand what happens is, if I put this simply, your body has finite resources to use through the day for everything that it needs to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But what happens is when you go through a trauma, the part of you that needs to protect calls on extra resources. It takes
Right.
a lot of focus, a lot of energy to protect.
Well, this is the other part of that.
And what
Back,
happens,
yeah.
the
Go
the
ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to
that's
cut
all
you
right.
off.
No,
Yeah.
I know we've got a delay as well. So, but the part of you that it draws resources from or becomes depleted in resources is your frontal cortex, your learning area.
Right.
So it's
I didn't know
underperforming.
that.
It's
Hmm.
underperforming. This is why so many people, this will answer a question for so many people who have complex post-traumatic stress today and wonder why they can't concentrate, why they can't finish their degree, why they can't get certain things done. And it's because your resources that you need to do that are being used by other parts of your body. And this is where people
Okay.
become um, have autoimmune diseases,
Hmm.
because resources that should be helping your body provide immune protection get taken to other areas to
That makes sense.
deal with fear, to deal
Hmm.
with protection, for whatever
Hmm.
for whatever reason. Yeah, the body is complex, but it only has a certain amount of things it can do, and if one part of it needs more, it's like if you're running, you can't also have a conversation.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
that makes sense.
it's
Yes.
the same thing. It's like your body was running to keep up with this trauma, to deal with this trauma, and it drew resources from elsewhere. So I just
That
thought I'd
makes sense.
bring that in there, because this comes up so much with people that they
It's
don't
important.
understand. Yeah.
I knew I was drained as a kid. I felt really heartbroken,
Yes, you
and I
can.
couldn't really accept that my parents were never going to get back together. And
Mhm.
so I was always praying that they would. And I remember when I was a child, we did a lot of walking. Kids walked everywhere. So I would walk home from school, and it was about a half mile from the elementary school back to my house. And I remember sitting down kind of halfway at the halfway point of my walk and having this thought at age 5. I wish my parents never gave birth to me. I wish I didn't exist. I wish, I could just die. It wasn't suicidal, like I want to kill myself. It was just, I don't want to be here anymore.
Right. Yeah, that's obviously that really did affect you very seriously, your father leaving. And I think there's something in this as well, in that as adults, because we tend to know what's going on, we forget that children don't, that they are vulnerable, that they are powerless. And here you were sitting in the midst of this, what for you was an absolute crisis. So,
Mhm.
aside from dealing with the emotional pain of that and all the change that was going on, you didn't have any knowledge. No one had told you when your dad might be back. For all you knew, you might not see him again.
Mhm.
And the
It
other thing that children do is blame themselves. No,
I actually did go into that.
you must have done.
I felt like somehow it was not just my fault, but also my brother, who was
Of
18
course.
months younger. I felt like somehow we ran our parents apart. It was,
Yes.
and that my father just didn't want to be around us anymore because of us. So
And
I
that's
absolutely did go through that.
That's so common, and that's important to mention as well.
Mhm.
Because anyone feeling that then, or knows that they went through that, will again understand that this is the process. Children are egocentric. They think everything revolves around them, not in a selfish way. It's just the way their brains are developing. So when
Mhm.
these things happen, what they take on board is, this must be my fault. This must be about me.
Mhm.
And then that becomes ingrained in the subconscious as, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, because if I was, my father would have stayed.
Right.
And that's what sets up
Good.
some of the problem blueprint for later on, trying to run your adult life based on the concept that you're not lovable and that you're not good enough, is where we
That's
run into the problems.
true.
So how did
So,
that progress for you? Here you are, this is very, very sad, this heartbroken 5-year-old. And I can really feel what that was for you, especially the fact that you said then you know, you just weren't coping in school and everything. It's obvious that you had an extreme trauma response that no one was aware of. So what happened to you from there? How did things progress?
uh, I guess what I want to say is that in the first grade, I did go through first grade, but then they held me back. So I went into what they call advanced first.
Right.
And they told my mother, because I was so, I guess, sad. They've sensed a sadness from me. And
Mm-hmm.
they said she seems very distraught and very distracted and in her own world, and we're not able to get her attention. My mom started having me tested. My mom thought maybe I had dyslexia or something. So,
No, but you
so that went
withdrew.
on to another journey,
You
seeing a
with
bunch
you
of therapists.
withdrew. So basically you withdrew from your reality.
I did. And my mom said that I became a very quiet child. Uh, a lot of people thought it was shyness, but it was more I was observing all the people around me and other kids, but I wasn't engaging.
Right. And that makes perfect sense. And I think that this is very, very important for people to hear what is going on there, so that they can make sense maybe of things that have happened to them, or maybe things that are happening to their own children.
Hmm.
Because any of us, but especially children, this is where depression comes from, especially
Yeah,
children, because they have no power, they have no choice to change things. So when they can't cope with what's going on around them, they will withdraw. And then
I
as
was, I
adults,
was, I was depressed.
yeah,
Nobody, of course, diagnosed that, but looking back, I realized I was depressed.
yeah,
My younger brother, though, I think because it happened when he was still really a baby, he he did not suffer. So my mom could take us to the park and there'd be kids playing on swings and jungle gyms, and she would say, "Go ahead and play." My brother would immediately engage and start playing with these kids and talking with them, and I typically would just stand there, maybe do a few things by myself, but I would not get close to anybody.
yeah. But your brother didn't have the attachment to your dad that you did. What you did, you had real grief.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, so your brother would not have processed this in the same way, because he
No.
didn't have the relationship, so he didn't have the, so what you actually went through, what actually was causing your trauma, the event was your dad leaving, but what caused the trauma and what caused it to take hold is almost unacknowledged and unresolved grief.
That's true. And I've never heard anybody put it that way, so thank you.
Ah,
I mean,
yeah,
I was feeling that, but nobody's ever
comes
really, even though I had therapy, she never really put it into those kinds of words, so
comes
thank
up a
you.
lot for me in my work. I do a lot around unresolved grief, so I'm
Mhm.
recognizing it a lot of the time. And that's just what came up, especially when you said, about your brother. Well, of course it was easier for him. He didn't have that attachment. He wasn't dealing with all the grief that went with that. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, so thank you. You're sharing some amazing experiences here that other people can really take something from. So, where did you progress with that? Obviously, extremely damaged, dealing with so much that clearly people didn't understand, having you tested for dyslexia, which I can understand. At the time, they would have done their best with what they had. And obviously, that still happens today. And sometimes today, it's still not a lot better, despite what's available to us. So, how do you go from there? Like, you're 5 years old and you're totally broken. Literally,
I'll tell
that's
you
how
a
it
couple of
sounds.
things. It kind of, in that, I'm going to say 5 through 7, it was a really rough time. And through all the therapy, and my mom did this for a few years with me. And she also had my IQ test done. so, and in the end, they said there's really nothing wrong with your daughter. She's lacking confidence. She doesn't feel safe,
Yeah.
and she needs somebody to talk to. And there's no one there for her to really talk to, because my mom was working, so I was a latchkey kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And the
and
compounding part was also being held back in this advance first. I think it also was a double whammy because I had a lot of friends, so I saw my peers leave me, and I felt like I was being punished in some way. And it's like, how did this happen to me? I mean, I've been just as engaged as everybody else in raising my hand and participating, so I don't know. So in the end, they found out the other thing too is that I needed glasses, and
oh,
I could not see the front. I couldn't see what was on the board. So when the teacher was giving instruction, and all of a sudden kids would be doing stuff, I really was puzzled, and I'd have to ask somebody, "Well, what's going on? Why are we doing this?" It's because I couldn't see the board.
okay.
Yeah. So anyway, what happened was my dad did start getting really involved with us. He was he got the rights to do the visiting every other weekend, and he was a coach. He signed up with the Parks and Rec so that he could coach baseball and football for kids. And he had my brother during the summer months doing a lot of stuff with him. And he lived on a boat in Marina del Rey. So as a kid, we got to hang out on the boat and sleep there. And so
Wow. Yeah.
that was good. That was all good stuff. But I would say my mom, for some reason, and I didn't understand this at the time, but I do now, she took a lot of what was going on with my father and she dumped it on us. So all her rage and anger and disappointment, she literally took it out on us. And I would say I felt like I was with Mother Dearest. For those of you who know the film, it's a classic, Mother Dearest. Um,
And for those of you who don't, look it up,
yeah,
watch it. You'll be able to
yeah,
find it somewhere. And just, yeah, for those of us who do know that film, then we know exactly what you're talking about. So, but for those who haven't, let's just say that it was involved of hidden, so that no one else knew, emotional and physical abuse is the
yes.
way I would describe that. Yes.
So that, without going into great detail, was very traumatic. So my young years, my dad actually gave me the key that rescued me. So that was part of my coping. I loved sports. I really took to that. So I was a kid that loved going out and stacking my activities. So I might play baseball in the morning at the park and then maybe meet with friends at a matinee, but then go ice skating in the evening. So I was just
Ah,
constantly doing it. It wasn't just the physical activity. I just loved it. And
well, it was a release. Well,
Yeah,
it's
but
been a release for you.
my parents also said that I had like a natural athleticism, and that my dad kind of saw that he could direct me in some things there. But my mom really didn't have that kind of a background, so she was puzzled by it, and she'll admit that she really didn't know.
The thing is, you didn't have safety, did you? You'd lost this. I'd written down the word safety before, because you lost the safety that you had in your father, because here he was, your solid rock, and
Hmm.
then he was gone. And then with what was happening at home, there was no safety and security at home. So of course you were going to try and put yourself in another environment. And it's amazing at that age, as you said, we're talking about the coping and the resilience that you developed. You found a way of surviving, but it was more than surviving. It was positive, wasn't it? It was positive for you.
I liked it was a natural thing. You know, as a kid, I wasn't thinking, "Oh, I'm going to tap into my coping." I
No.
realize that now. But it was a natural way that I did cope with this by always meeting with my friends and hanging out at their homes, and their parents in a way would adopt me into their house and say, like I was a family member, "Oh, you can help yourself in the fridge anytime, Diana, and you can come through the back door of the house. You don't have to knock at the front. And if you want to stay over, you can stay over." So I spent as much time as I could away from my house, and really tried, even if I was out playing when I was a kid, you literally could play until the street lights came on, and then
Yeah,
it was considered dinner time.
I
And
remember that too.
yeah, so I would just stay out playing, and then of course head home and have dinner, and then I had homework, do it, and then go to sleep. And typically my mom was already gone in the morning. We would make our own breakfast. She would have the boxes and everything and say, "This is where your stuff is." Sometimes if she did have a break, she would make our lunches. But many times she'd have all the supplies there and say, "These are the sandwiches you guys are going to make for your lunch." So we would do that. In a way, I think that was good, because that's where the resiliency comes in, where we were, my brother and I, doing for ourselves.
Yeah.
We were young when we were doing all this stuff, but it's, that part of it, I didn't think was too bad.
And he obviously younger than you, so I'm assuming that to a degree you were also looking after him.
I was initially, and I will give you one other sad story. My mom had to put us in after school daycare when
Yeah.
we were really young. And so this is actually going back to, when I was 5 again. And my brother was really, um, still, a baby. So
Hmm.
my mom, her hours were so late. She worked for, I believe at that time it was TWA, I'm trying to remember what it's the airlines,
Yeah.
TWA Airlines. And she worked on in Los Angeles. It's the Wilshire corridor area, and we were in the San Fernando Valley, so she had quite a commute. And she, would leave us, and I, there was a point I was trying to make here. Oh yeah, so we're in the daycare, and she would pick us up. Usually we were the last kids when they were closing. It was like 8 or 9 p.m.
Wow.
We would have dinner at this daycare. They would make our food for us. And I remember my brother was crying so hard he couldn't eat the peas. This woman was giving him a spoonful of peas, and he was crying and spitting them out. And they asked me to come over to comfort my brother. So there, even though he didn't know about he wasn't really aware of our parents splitting, it had its impact on him.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you must have both just felt, I mean, obviously looking at it in an adult perspective, you can see why. But at the time, as children, as you say, you weren't looking at it, and you must have just felt rejected and abandoned by both of your parents.
I did. And I think we were. So that's the other part of this, is that I think this happens a lot with divorces. My mother, she, in some ways, it's some weird competition that my dad was kind of holding. So when we would see him, he would say very nasty things about our mother.
Right.
And my mother would, she actually was pretty good. She held back. She didn't want us to not love our dad, but
Mhm.
she kind of acted like we were more his kids than we were hers.
Right.
And he acted more like we were her kids than we were his. So it put us in a limbo spot.
Yeah, very confusing as well, but it's especially because of the way children take that on board, without looking at the bigger picture, without seeing what might have been going on with them, that your mum needed to work, etc., etc. As children, you don't see any of that. That's what we see later when we look back. But when you're
Right.
in it, I just can't imagine what you were actually going through on top of everything that you've already said. And it's so important that we're aware of this.
Hmm.
If people are going through something like this, they're aware of their own children, and how their children might be taking it on and absorbing it,
Hmm.
as rejection, as being unwanted. Because I think parents don't think about that at all. you know
My mother, she did the fine arts program at USC. So she was very much involved with introducing my brother and I to the arts and the love of arts. So I want to say my parents, they did give us gifts.
uh-huh.
I
And
do I do appreciate those gifts, those things that they brought to us, exposed us to. But there is unfortunately a lot of things that they did that were extremely painful,
sure.
and they were unaware of themselves. And
Yeah.
I think that's the key here. And I didn't really discover any of this until I got into my 20s and started seeing a therapist.
And I
And
was I was
yeah,
just about to ask you how all of this affected you going forward in your life. What happened as you move forward with all this baggage, with all this hurt, all this grief, all this emptiness. You can, anyone listening to this can see how moving forward as an adult with all of that, it's going to have a serious impact on what you give out to the world, your view of the world, and also the people you attract to your world. So yeah, move us forward.
I saw that my father was interested in creating activities that were more boy orientated activities. And it seemed like he was more interested in having a close relationship with my brother and nurturing that, and not so much with me. So my brain thought boys are more important. So
Right.
I became a tomboy. I was the little girl that I liked wearing dresses, but I also liked to show, hey, I'm just as good as my brother. And I would tell my father, I can play baseball and I can throw the football, and watch me do this and watch me do that. And what I discovered, though, it didn't really matter. Yeah, you're a kid and you're still trying to get approval.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not until I was in my 20s I realized, wow, I'm never going to get these people to approve of me. They're
That's
just
a big
not.
that's a
Mhm.
big realization. I work with people who are in their 50s and 60s and still trying to get the approval of their family that they will never get.
Yeah, it was more of a intellectual studying. I figured that out. But I tried to run away from home when I was 12. There was a lot of stuff I did that, in the end, I realized I did take off, and I hung out with lots of friends in their families' homes, and then it got to a point where I had no place to stay. like, okay, now who can I stay with? And I realized, oh, I have to go home now. And my mom, she was so involved with the arts and acting. She was in the theater world. She was, I think she thought it was good for us. I think she rationalized in her mind, it's okay. They're off being young kids and they're doing their thing. So she thought it was good for us to be independent. And so in a way that she rationalizes it, but to me, she was very disconnected.
Well, she probably was, because she was dealing with her own trauma. But again, that's something you don't
Right.
know as kids. And it brings up the point that as parents, we absolutely have to do everything we can to heal from our own past traumas and all the baggage that we carry so that we can parent properly. Because when we are
Right.
not complete and whole, we can't parent in a complete and whole way, you know.
Hmm.
And that's so vital. I know that what you know now is your mum was a product of her upbringing, and she was probably withdrawing from some of that. She will have had her own story with your dad, and here you and your brother are as products of that. And this is the cycle and the chain that we have to break
Right.
once we
Exactly.
understand. Yeah. So where did
But
it take you to as an adult, all of this?
well, it's very, again, that independence was good for me in a lot of ways. And I seem to have a natural interest in being a little entrepreneur because I got busy with making things and going up to our local Hallmark and asking them if they liked the products that I was making and if they could display them and sell them. And they said, sure, bring more. And we'll test them, and they put the prices on there, and then they said we'll test the market, and then they called me and said, can you make more because we've sold out, bring more.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got very industrious, and then I saved a lot of money and I paid for myself to go to camp, and I won for YMCA selling the most candy. It got very competitive, and so that was kind of neat that I was top sales for the candy department. And I put a lot of my money in my little savings box. And trying to think of my age, I guess I was about 12 when I had all this money. And my grandmother said, we really need to open up a savings account. And she took me into the bank, and that's what we did. So I think that that felt really good,
Yeah.
being able to have that. Uh, so that's a separate thing. Is my confidence was, by the time I was in going into seventh grade, I skipped, and they basically what they did was they had me. This is for middle school in the United States. They had me go seventh grade for the first semester and eighth grade for the second semester. And
So this
yeah,
this
typically
was
it's seventh, eighth, and ninth. But I just went seventh and eighth in 1 year, and then ninth.
so so obviously everything you were doing outside of the home, all your sport and on all your entrepreneurial stuff, it gave you the confidence which started to show in school. Do you see what
Yeah,
happened there?
yeah,
As your body wasn't using resources to
yeah.
deal with grief and hurt and rejection and everything else, or not so many,
Hmm.
you became someone else because your body was using your energy and your resources in a different way. Here you had something feeding you, something positive, and it
Yes.
literally changes the chemical makeup of your body. And that is why you suddenly saw yourself excel in school in that way. Your body was able to give the right resources to the right. I always
That
say
makes sense.
it's
Yeah.
like a castle. If a castle's under siege and at war, then the fields aren't being planted
Oh, I
once
like
the
that.
war is over, because all the
Hmm.
resources are going to defense. But once the war is over, you can start producing food and feeding everyone again.
I
That's,
like that.
yeah,
That's a
that's
good.
a really simple way of looking what happens in your body. Yeah.
Yeah. So the age of 12, that was a big year for me. And then I really took off from there. I got involved with public speaking. I got involved with track and field. I started competing in city meets, and I continued with track and field and then cross country once I was in college. And I was also playing tennis, and then got involved very much with hiking and mountaineering and rock climbing. So the outdoors became really important to me. I
Yeah.
loved those times when I was out in the backcountry in the Sierras. And I thought, I think I was about probably 15 or 16. I thought, I want a job where I can be out in nature most of the time because I just love this. I don't want it to end. And so I focused a lot of my energy on thinking that. And it didn't initially materialize for me. I was a biology major, and then I thought, well, I'll go into physical therapy. And then I switched it to political science. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll be a lawyer for environmental law. And then somebody brought to my attention, actually, a family member, one of my relatives said, the best way to make a real impact on young people is through education. So I did
Nice.
teaching. Yeah. So the education is what I really enjoyed. It was focused on social studies, economics, and English. And I moved into that and then thought, instead of teaching in a public school environment, I'd rather set up, something where I can teach all ages. So that's where the nonprofit came in.
Right, brilliant. Okay, so you had all these positive, you started to find all these positives in your life to support you through what you were going through, and helped you become the person that you are today. In that journey, I mean, everyone can hear what you went through and I'm sure relate to so much. What do you think in everything that you've done to help yourself heal? Yeah, to talk us through some of the things that you have done, and what was it that really made the difference for you?
Well, I would say what helped me was getting involved with mountaineering. And the reason why I'm saying that, again, it was a big shift for me being a city girl and then being introduced to the outdoors. And it was through my church, and a pastor had a fund for teenagers that if they didn't have the money, their parents couldn't pay for them to go. It was write an essay as to why you want to do this, why you want to have this experience. So I did that, and through this fund, I was covered for quite a few different experiences that were life changing.
Wow, that's such a
Yeah,
great that's such great foresight on his part to realize the impact that that could have on someone's life. And the other important thing here to mention is that it's well known. People can research this, look this up. It's well known that being in nature is extremely good for trauma. It is highly
yeah,
recommended as trauma therapy to be in nature. And it doesn't
yeah.
have to be mountaineering, walking in the woods, being by the beach, anything to do with nature is very calming and very good at helping us to just center and to just be present in the present rather than caught up in the past. So,
Yes,
yeah, and obviously that's what worked for you. That's
it's
why I
something
mentioned
that's
as well.
yeah come out too. It's become popular in the last 5 years. They're calling it forest bathing, and it's really getting people in touch with exactly that, being able to be still and listen to the environment, listen to the birds, the
Yeah,
creek, take in all the uh, what through your senses, what's going
definitely.
on in a forest environment, and it's very relaxing.
Yeah, it's very grounding, and the reason they'll use the forest is because it's very, it's quiet in some ways, but then when you listen, So what you have to do, you have to be really present, and you'll
Yes.
focus on first things that you can see, and then you'll close your eyes and focus on things you can feel, things you can hear, things you can smell, things you can touch, and it is very, very grounding. Yeah, it's wonderful.
It
And
is.
obviously you found that too. So, yeah.
I think with just the idea of forest bathing is a lot of people, they do have trouble being in the present. And you mentioned being in the present. So it helps people to pull them into where they really are. And
Yeah.
again, the grounding of their sensations or their tapping into their senses in a way that they don't when they're just doing the regular 9 to 5 or their routine or whatever that may be in the city.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason people struggle to be present as well, and again, for people just to help them understand, is that because when you have traumas that have happened to you in the past, your body takes a snapshot. Your body and your mind take a snapshot of what that feels like. And at the
Hmm.
time, it produced chemical reactions within you as a response. And then what happens moving forward, because it exists within you as a blueprint, it's imprinted within you. So when
Hmm.
something happens that is similar to that, your body immediately recreates the blueprint, which
Oh,
keeps
yes.
taking us back, which is why we keep recreating those moments, which is why they're hard for other, which is why
Get
it's
out.
important to break these things. Yeah, because it's harder to have those reactions when you're so grounded in something calm and peaceful. And you're more able to break the chain and to tell yourself you just don't need that anymore, and to create a different kind of response to it that your body then starts to reproduce that one rather than the original one. Yeah, that's
Right.
why.
Yeah. So I think that's what I was feeling a great sense of freedom
Yeah,
when I was this 14, 15-year old. And then I uh, I tackled this. This was a real life changing event too. Participating in mountaineering.
yeah,
I was doing the track and field, so I was running basically 3 to 4 miles every day, and then I signed up to do the mountaineering program. And this again was through the church, and they said that they were only going to take 12, and we would be hiking Mount Whitney for this was just for exercise. So that was preparing us for Mount Rainier, which is, I think it's 14,410 is the elevation. But the thing that makes it difficult in comparison to Mount Whitney is got 20, I think it's 24 moving glacial plates. So it's an intense deal. You have to have a rope team and you have to train and put the uh, special gear on. You've got the ice axe, and I think that they were called crampons. They put them on the bottom of your boots so that they can dig into the ground. They're like
yeah,
steel teeth. And I was the only girl in our group that made it to the summit. And we started out with about 5 girls. And so that was a big
and
thing
this,
for
I
me.
can see here your resilience and your coping. And the other important thing about that is, I imagine, like, I can hear you talking about the mountaineering, and it's like a team. So here you are being accepted. You felt so much rejection from the environment you were in, and here you are in a new environment where you are accepted and a part of something, which is
Yes,
so important.
it was very good. Yep.
Yeah, because our,
And
our our number one human need is to be accepted and connected. And if you can't find that in somewhere, you will
mhm,
try and find it somewhere else.
mhm.
Which is why sometimes our childhood experiences are so damaging, because they cause us, like you found it within the mountaineering, which is great. But what they can do is cause us to find, because we're so desperate to be accepted and connected, we literally will hook up with anyone and anything that will accept us. That's the damage that it causes. So yeah.
So I did not do bad things. I was a very competitive, athletic, and I would say ambitious for a young kid.
Yeah.
And I got involved with the science fair. Again, I'm back in, I think it was my junior year in high school. We did some sort of science fair, and I had a project there. So then in college, like I said, there was the teaching, but I continued with the athleticism, where I was involved with, again, the outdoors, as well as the stuff that, the running and the tennis. And I've always done this. I've always continued to be very active.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously it was very positive for you. That's why. Why would you stop doing something that is so positive for you? Such a good aspect of your life. And obviously your love of the outdoors has led you to the work that you do today, which is fantastic. All
Thank
this
you.
Focus on the environment. We need more of that. We need more people doing therapy. We need more people focusing on the environment. Less focus on making huge amounts of money, more focus on love and on self and on family, and I think maybe we said earlier, that's some of what this what's happened to us, this pandemic at the moment, that's what it's teaching us.
It is.
But listening
Go
to your
ahead.
story, along with everyone else that I interview, I never fail to be in awe of how people cope, and who they become. And what it shows people is exactly what we're here for, what is possible. When we say your past, it's easy to say things like, oh, your past doesn't have to define you. It's up to you to recreate your future. These are all words that we can throw out there, and they're absolutely true. That's why we say them. But we have to be careful that we're not judging people and saying, oh, this is so easy. Why aren't you doing this? It's not easy. It's possible. You don't have to sit with your depression. You don't have to live with your complex post-traumatic stress. And I think there's a lot of talk these days about how you'll always have depression. You can't get over your acute anxiety. All you can do with complex post-traumatic stress disorder is manage it. And it's not true. And that's why it's so important to share these stories, so that people can see what you go through, and then where you end up. But you don't end up there by accident. As you said, you've done the therapy, you've done the work. It's a process that we have to go through. And as we said earlier,
I think that therapy isn't something that you should be afraid of, or that you should feel it's going to hurt you in some way. And unfortunately, a lot of people still think this, but I am somebody who has to really get the message out not to, because it's a safe place. And these are professionals who have trained, like yourself, to be there and to point out things that we may not see. Just like today, you pointed out a lot of things that there's always something new that's revealed. And we're always, as people, we're complex beings, and we're always evolving and learning.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you so much for making that point, because obviously I'm a huge fan of therapy in whatever form, as long as it's appropriate for the situation. And I still, obviously, I work with other RTT therapists, and I work with a mindfulness counselor, and I work with a mentor. And as you say, people might look at me and go, well, why would you be doing all of that? Look at where you are. But I have things going on in my life too. And as you said, we're constantly growing and evolving. and peeling
Yeah.
off the layers and revealing who we really are. And sometimes it's just great to have someone to sit with you in that,
Yes,
and to help you move forward. So
I
yeah,
think
very,
that's the
very much.
thing.
Um,
Discovering how we talked about this a little bit before we came on, that most of us at some point in our lives, when we reflect back, realize our parents had their own their own obstacles. They were children too. Their
yeah,
childhood
yes,
presented them with certain things, and when we're children, we're not aware of any of that.
no,
And I learned a lot of these things once I was in my mid to late 20s, and then into my 30s. I started feeling empathy, and I can say this, that my mother, she had been really abused as a child, and her mother had remarried, and the stepfather was very sick. And I'll give you one example. When she was literally like 3 years old, and I've heard this from different family members, she was crossing the room, and my step grandfather would say, "Well, look at her. She looks like she needs a little red light over her room.
wow,
She's just a 3-year-old girl." The feeling is that maybe she had been molested or raped by him, but she said she can't really remember, so she's probably blocked it.
yeah, yeah,
So,
wow. But
and then my yes,
it's so important what you're saying there, that as children, teenagers, when we've gone through stuff, we kind of just blame the environment that we came from. And then as we get older and we're able to look back and understand that our parents were a product of their upbringing, that is therapy in itself.
yes,
And almost without exception, everyone that I speak to, not all of them move to forgiveness, or, but most of them do. But even to have that empathy and understanding, as you said, it changes things. It changes how you feel, which is good for you, because all the hurt and anger that you're holding on to from the lack of understanding, um, is
it was really, really
problematic.
for me, and I started releasing it and wanting to connect with my mother in different ways. And I still try with my mom. There's I realize there's a lot of toxic behavior that's not healthy for me in the relationship with her, where I've had to distance myself, but I still love my mother, and I still love my father very much. It's just also seeing what happened to them.
Yeah.
My father was an only child, and he was a latchkey. And when he was raised, his parents literally would take him somewhere, drop him there, and just leave him for the day. And he said sometimes, like there was some sort of a air show, and his parents dropped him at the air show and did not see him for 3 days. Just left him there.
Wow.
But then when you go back to his parents, they were from Texas, and they were raised on farms with big families. And when their families couldn't make their ends meet, back then they were known for dropping their children off at the orphanage. And then at some point when they had the money, they'd go back to the orphanage to pick their kids up.
Yeah, see how life has changed.
Yeah.
And it just brings us to understanding the opportunity that we have with everything that's available to us. We only have to have a keyboard to be able to research so much of this stuff to understand. And understanding and knowledge isn't healing, but it is power, because it gives you the opportunity to look at things differently and to start to think about what you might have to do yourself. What work do you have to do on yourself to break this cycle? If I'm a product of my upbringing and I've brought up my boys a certain way, and it was based on how I was brought up, and I know that I was wrong, how do I go back and fix this to make sure that my boys move into the world as complete and whole human beings, knowing that they are loved and that they are enough, and absolutely as they are is perfect, and not to worry about anyone else who doesn't think that. And because of my parenting and because of all the trauma that I went through, not necessarily just to do with at home, but to do with being bullied at school as well. That was my big trauma, actually. My big trauma was that. And it seriously affected me. And I've had to go back. And actually, what we have to do as parents, we have to own what we've done. And I've gone back and done this with my boys. They're 23 now. But I've talked to them so much about my depression, about my life with their father, because he's had a lot of narcissistic traits. And now that they're adults, they can see all this, and we've kind of done all this healing together. And they've been very supportive of everything I've done for myself. But I've been very open with them, and I've
So that's good that you're willing to do that work.
We have to.
But a lot of people don't have that message as parents that they need to go and take time to be introspective and do the work, their own internal revolution. That's really what it is.
And then we have to go back and help our kids do theirs. It's made a tremendous difference to everything.
I'm
just
sure.
to go back and explain and to heal those hurts. And one of my sons actually said to me recently, and this will help people too, and he said, I was talking to him about something. He said, "It's okay, Mum." He said, "You don't have to say this anymore," because I keep trying to explain myself, feeling like I have to. And he put me straight, and he said, "It's okay, Mum. We've done all this. It's fine."
Oh, good.
He said, "As an adolescent, my job was to blame you, but it kept me stuck." He said, "And as an adult, my job is to accept that you were also a product of your environment. And now it's my job to be a product of mine as I understand it now." And that is
very good that he figured all that out.
I mean,
How old was he when he said that?
It was recently. So he was
recently.
he's 23.
That's it. He's still young.
Yeah. But again, he had some anxiety issues, so he's had therapy and everything. But
it's around the same time too. I guess 20s it's an important time. There's a lot of discovery in your 20s.
A lot of discovery and needing to be accepted so that you can move forward, definitely. And doing this work with our kids. And I'm going to say this actually, even now that we're dealing with coronavirus, I've got a 23-year-old at home, and I think it's very easy to kind of think, oh, I haven't got a child here. But inside, even our late teens and our early 20s, they are like children at the moment. They are scared. They are scared about what's going on, about the future, what's going to happen, all their plans, everything. They are just about to launch their lives. And
it is
the world
scary.
is changing.
It's scary. And acknowledging that is important.
It's important to still be parents to them. Like maybe in a way that we haven't for a while, because they've been adults doing their own thing, but suddenly he's not working, he's not out with his friends, he's here. And I realize when he says, "Mum, have you got time for a coffee?" And even the other day, "Mum, can we bake a cake?"
That is nice. Did you?
Yeah, we did. Oh, absolutely. Because to me, that's like that's the child coming out. That's not saying in words, but that's some kind of reflection of, I'm scared at the moment. This is all a bit uncertain. And then he actually said to me, I've got some anxiety at the moment. And I said, "Yeah, I know.
Let's do something
that's
productive and that you guys can enjoy."
So it's important that we remember that at the moment, it's not just our kids that are being kids. our older kids are also feeling so much that they don't understand. It's important that we're there for them. Anyway, I digressed.
That's
Just
okay.
when we were
I
talking.
just think it's important that people censor what they take in the news and the media at this time.
True.
I really will maybe just read something or listen to the radio and say, that's it, 1 hour, that's it. I don't want to do a whole day of hearing
Yeah.
this and taking it in.
Yeah, so I think we've called it media hygiene. Have good media hygiene at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And then meditating too, I think is important.
yeah,
Even if it's just 15 minutes. And it's just self-reflection, really, taking some quiet time.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's what we were saying earlier, like meditation, and again, just that if you can be out in nature, but just take that time. Yeah, self-care. We all need to practice self-care at the moment. We all have a lot going on.
I
So
agree. Yeah.
So do you have yeah, fascinating insights. Thank you, Diane. You've enabled us to cover so much that I hope will make people think about some things in their own lives in a different way, or at least to understand them. But do you have anything that you would like to leave? If there's nothing, that's fine. I know we've covered so much, but is there a parting thought that you would like to leave people with? Something that they can take with them?
Well, I think that if you're hurting inside, the best thing to do is to let yourself have that. Allow yourself to feel it. Maybe journal. That helped me a lot, writing a lot out and releasing it, and then being proactive in your life and not dwelling on it. You give yourself a set time, release it, and then you've got to let it go and move on. I like to do this, as you know, the sports, the activity that helps me, and a routine where you're doing this particular thing at a certain time. So in my case, I like to get up early and walk with my dogs. It's usually 2 to 3 miles in the morning, and then I do it again in the evening after dinner. So
Wonderful.
I'm getting 5 to 7 miles generally. So it's a nice workout, and it feels
Wonderful.
good when
For
you
you and the
exercise.
dogs.
Yeah, it doesn't it make you feel good after you've exercised? Every day?
Absolutely. Yeah, again, it changes the chemical makeup in your body. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's designed to
So,
make you feel good. Good for you and the dogs.
so that's what's helped me, and I even life will always basically be a challenge. There's always going to be some ups and downs, and it's how we flow with it and being flexible, adaptable, taking it in, and again, releasing it, forgiving, and being proactive in your life so that you won't be paralyzed by it. I think that's really the key.
Well, thank you so much for that. There's so much there, and those lovely parting thoughts. And obviously, it's worked for you, and it's got you to where you are today. So thank
Yeah.
you so much. And obviously, if anyone wants to connect with you, I imagine, I'd love to think that people would go to your website. So, we'll definitely be sharing all your links
Okay, great.
in in the show notes. So,
Thank you,
yeah,
Sarah. I
thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much for everything you've shared. Really, really appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and I love what you shared too.
Thank you so much.